Jewish history. So now, when an armistice was finally decreed in 1949, Israel ended up with a small country with a narrow waistline. By the way, for those who are watching politics today, there's a constant call for people to go back to the pre-67 borders. Okay? Why do they say pre-67 borders? Because they want to attach everything to the 6-day war. Really, though, what they're asking for is the original, well, not even the original borders, the 1949 borders, where we had a 9-mile across border from land to land, okay, which is a narrow waistline. So it says a large inward bulge in the middle was called the West Bank. They called Judea and Samaria by the Jews. And that was annexed by Jordan, which was originally part of the Balfour Declaration for the Jews. Okay. Jordanians also control half of Jerusalem, the eastern half. That's where the wall is. Okay? Containing the old city with the Temple Mount. Jews were cut off from the access to the holiest site in Judaism. That is, to date, the holiest site. Because we can't get on the Temple Mount. That's the absolute holiest. So some people say that they know, forget the Institute, they know where they can walk on the Temple Mount that doesn't earn them the punishment of being cut off from the Jewish people, spiritually being cut off from the Jewish people. But for the most part, there's a sign at the entrance to the Temple Mount saying Jews should not, and it's not by the Arabs, this is the rabbis who said Jews should not go beyond this point. Okay, because it's the holiest thing, and we're not fit for that because we don't have the red heifer and so on and so forth. So, but they had cut that off, so we couldn't even get to the wall, which is what people do today. And what they also did was they immediately set out to destroy all Jewish sites, because if they could destroy the Jewish sites, it would destroy any semblance of a Jewish people that was once there. Now, if you remember, we did talk about Nachmanides. Nachmanides, when he returned to Israel, had built a synagogue. Okay? He had the synagogue built. It's called, it's still there, actually. They call it the Ramban synagogue. The synagogue of Nachmanides. Jordanians, when they took over in 49, destroyed the building. It wasn't destroyed by crusade. It wasn't destroyed by anything else. It was destroyed in 1949 or 50, somewhere around there. And what was the reason? According to Jeff Seidel, who gives tours in that area, he said, and I have to assume he's correct, I don't just say it out of the blue, the law of the Islamic groups is that any building that is taller than the mosque must be knocked down. And the Ramban synagogue was 1 foot taller. Talking about 12 inches here, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? 1 foot taller, and they destroyed it. Now, recently I heard it was rebuilt. But it's people. When I went there in '88, people were still praying in the basement. Apparently they made the basement better, so you could still pray there. But it's you walked around, it looked like the ruins, like any other ruins in Jerusalem. But it's to know that it went down in '49 was just very sad.
After all, it survived.
Right, after everything survived, it went down in '49 or '50. Okay. So that was one of the things you have to keep in mind. Okay, and so now with the creation of the state of Israel, the Jews poured into Israel, and so we have a brand new life going on. You have a lot of other peoples too, because you have the Sephardic Jews from the Middle Eastern countries now are colliding with the Ashkenazic Jews. Once again, remember, we've been separated for a good 1,000 years, and now we're coming together. So because the establishment of the state of Israel was accompanied by an increased Arab hatred of Israel, the Jewish people were no longer able to live safely in most Arab countries, resulting in hundreds of thousands of Jewish refugees from the Arab countries, there were pogroms, there were riots, there was confiscation of property. The Jews in the Arab lands were subject to intolerable hardships and discrimination. And it's amazing. For hundreds of years, while they weren't loving us, they weren't being this mean. But now that we had a state of Israel, and let's get this in perspective, okay? The state of New Jersey.
Yeah.
You have the rest of the land to yourself. We took a little bit of the land that we were given. We didn't even take it. It wasn't even by war. We were given the land by the government. And so you disagreed with that. We should take your land. Fine. I'm not going to get into that ridiculous argument. But we were given that land. And now, so what? You have to fight over it. And because we're in that land, there's a Jewish presence in that land. Now the Jews that were your neighbors and your friends and you worked with them, you can no longer tolerate them. That shows how hatred works. And my father says it's how it happened in Germany too. In Germany it was the same thing. You had friends, and then for one day you were friends, the next day you were vermin. He remembers that. I should say he remembered. But it's and he used to tell me how that worked. It's unbelievable how they could turn in less than 24 hours. That's what happened. So here also they had to deal with pogroms. So if I have to do with that, we're out of here. Beyond the Arab persecution, there was a dream of return to the land. So finally, after 1,100 years, they made the dream come true. Okay. So, like I said, we had approximately 600,000 Jewish refugees fled Arab countries for the land of Israel. And unlike the Arab refugees who were still in refugee camps, the Jewish refugees were absorbed into the mainstream of Israeli population. Over a period of 4 years, the population of Israel, 600,000, absorbed another 600,000 people. Okay, can you imagine? We don't absorb that many. Okay. Now, unfortunately, like I said, the absorption of Sephardic Jews wasn't easy because they were traditional and they were committed to some sense of an obligation of Judaism. But who had set up Israel? Who was the government? Socialist, secular. So here they come into these Sephardim are coming with their crazy customs, and we have to straighten these people out. We have to bring them up to the 20th century. This is not good. Okay, we have to make them civilized. So the public education system stripped many Sephardim of their heritage, culture, Judaism, and it's according to this, the highest percentage of prison population in Israel is of Sephardic origin. They destroyed these people. Israel did a good job. We do a good job for ourselves every once in a while. Okay. There was a definite elitism on the part of the Ashkenazi or European socialists of the Zionist movement to look down on Sephardi Jews as being primitive. Okay. You have one scandal, which is still being debated as to its veracity, is that the children of Yemenite immigrants were kidnapped by the government officials so that they could be adopted and raised by Ashkenazi parents, while the parents were told that their children had died. Well, who knows? It's true, not true. Apparently, it's a scandal that goes on. So it made it, at least into this history book for a little while. It's not sure where you would go with that. Although there was a technical ceasefire, there was still trouble with the Arab nations. Not only the Arab nations not recognize the state of Israel, but they bided their time for the next opportunity to attack. The Arab countries frequently send terrorists across the border to attack Israel. Certain things don't change. Yeah, that's continuous this very day. In Israel, there were frequent attacks on civilians by snipers, bombers, and terrorists. In the 1950s, mid-1950s, so the Egyptian president Gamal Abdel Nasser closed the Suez Canal to Israeli shipping. I don't know if was anybody around?
Yeah. You were I remember the newsreel.
Sorry?
They had newsreel from the movie theater.
Yep, there you go. Yeah. The United Nations, as was typical, said that Israel should compromise. That's good. Okay. Even though there was a treaty guaranteeing universal shipping through the Suez. UN said that Israel should send their goods through on foreign ships, and Egypt impounded the goods. It didn't matter how they were going to get across. Okay, the Egyptians did not want Israelis to make a living. Okay, then the United Nations suggested that Israel sell the goods to foreign companies before sending them on ships through the Suez Canal. Egypt took that as well. Okay, so it doesn't help. Once I'm selling it, I can. The Egyptians were saying, we don't care if NIPSCO is going to buy something. We know it's really from Israel, so we're going to take it from you too. There was actually, I just saw, there's a movie of much later, but same sort of thing where the pirates of Somalia pirates, Captain Phillips, something like that? Yeah. The same sort of thing, only he was going through I forget what the story was, but same sort of thing where the Israelis were trying to get through, but it wasn't pirates, it was the government saying no.
What year was it?
1950s, around there. I wasn't alive to see the news show. I can't help that.
Yeah, I was. I vaguely remember it.
Right. When there was nothing more than the United Nations when there was nothing more than that the United Nations would suggest to the Jews, Israel preemptively attacked Egypt, took the Sinai Peninsula in a battle that's known as the Sinai Campaign, together with Britain, France, and Israel. Together with Britain and France, Israel won control over the Suez Canal from Nasser. Great. That means we can go through again? Doesn't work that way. Never. But it's that easy. In usual twist of history, the United Nations and the United States forced Israel, Britain, and French to retreat. And it was given back to Nasser, and once again, terrorism started to plague. This is the way in all the wars, by the way. Whenever Israel would gain territory, and it was always a defensive attack, you're not letting us live, we have to attack, sort of thing. The United Nations and the United States would always say, return. And they did until 1967. That's when Israel said to everybody, go jump in a lake.
Yes.
But until then, they had 3 or 4 wars. I forget how many wars there were. But each time they kept going back, and the United Nations kept saying, we'll protect you. We'll send out border guards. Absolutely meant nothing. You might as well just send my little, my fish to protect that border. It was worthless. Totally worthless.
That's why some military officers refer to the UN as the United Nothing.
There you go. It's totally worthless. I remember learning that when I was learning history. That was unbelievable. How many times? It was 3 or 4 times. Three times that they were told to return, and they did. And then it served nothing. So in early '67, Egypt blockaded the Straits of Tiran to Israel, and that's the only, by the way, it provides the only access to Port of Eilat, which is Israel's only port leading to the Indian Ocean. So they blockaded the Straits of Tiran to Israeli shipping. An act of war according to the definitions of the Geneva Convention. Egypt assembled tanks, troops, and began to rattle their sabers together with their allies in Syria. Egypt pushed the envelope a little further. After this 56 Sinai campaign, the United Nations had guaranteed Israel's security, promising that there would be a UN security force stationed at the Sinai to protect from attack by the Egyptians. The only way Nasser could attack Israel was through the Sinai. So Nasser went to the UN, demanded to get your troops out of there. The United States said, okay, no problem. We're out. Go ahead. With the United Nations gone, what did you say? The United nothing? Okay. So the Egyptians established forward bases in Sinai and further blockaded Israel. At the same time, Syria significantly increased troop movements in the Golan Heights on Israel's northern border. Israel decided to defend itself. It would have to strike, if it was to defend itself, it would have to strike preemptively. So once again, on June 5th, 1967, they did. Okay? They attacked the air forces of Egypt, Syria, destroying about 80% of their air power on the first day, and that gave Israel total air superiority for the rest of the war. They captured the Golan Heights, which had been a constant source of sniping by Syria on the kibbutzim in the northern Israel. They took the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip, and that were primary base for launching terrorism. Again, nothing's changing. In 2014, you hear these names. That's the scariest part, and it's still used for the exact same things that were used for in 67 and 56. It's never changed. Okay? Against Israel's advice to stay out, Jordan entered the war, resulting in Israel's capture of Judea, Samaria, otherwise known as the West Bank. By the way, at that point, of course, they get back the wall. Get back Jerusalem. In the last few days of the war, the Israeli army triumphantly retook the eastern half of Jerusalem. Those soldiers involved in the conquest of the first Jews were the first Jews in almost 20 years to offer prayers at the Western Wall, the holiest site, like we said, for the first time in almost 2,000 years, all holy sites, including the Temple Mount, the tomb of Mother Rachel in Bethlehem, the burial site of the patriarchs in Hebron, were now in the possession of the Jewish state. It took 6 days to accomplish that. Okay, you can call it, or you can say it's a miracle. I say it's a miracle. You can argue that was a military coup. I think whoever does is insane. Like I said many times, there's no war other than the 6-day war that took 6 days to pull the war off. Not even America against Iran. That took 3 weeks when we toppled Hussein. Was Iran? Iraq. Yeah. We were in the same place for so many years already. I keep forgetting where everybody is. But so to take Iraq, it took 3 weeks. CNN war took 3 weeks or 4 weeks. You remember that war? That was in 1990. That was what we call it. It was nicknamed the CNN war. That was the first Bush. First Daddy Bush versus again Hussein. It was the same thing. It was Iraq again. Was that Iran or Iraq?
Iraq.
That was Iraq. That was against Iraq, right? So Daddy Bush had to go and then Baby Bush had to go in. But that took, even the CNN war took, I think, 3 or 4 weeks or more. Maybe it took 3 months. Forget what it was. But no, wars don't end quickly. Here it was 6 days. Now what also happened was in 67 when we got the wall back. That's when you see all these pictures of these soldiers who, remember, the soldiers are not religious. They're secularists for the most part. And they came to the wall, and they were overcome with feeling for this set of stones, and they couldn't stand it. One guy saw it. The story goes that one secularist saw another person hugging the stones and crying and saying these words, and he said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, don't you understand where we're at?" And so the guy, the soldier, the non-religious soldier, started to cry. So what are you crying? He said, "Because I see you crying for the wall. I don't even know why the wall's important, so I have to cry." So that's sort of the story. And whether or not the story happened or not, who knows? But they were trying to get that across, that people didn't even know what they were fighting for after all. What am I fighting for? Ruins, you know. And I guess the story would end up that the person was religious and so on and so forth. I don't know if I don't know if it's true or not.
Sort of a legacy.
And his house is a big rabbi. That's normally how they end. But the story, like I said, whether or not the story is true, it makes a point. That if I don't know why I'm fighting for something, and I see you fighting and crying, and I'm thinking, shouldn't I be doing this too? And Israel had to re-educate itself as to what its history was. And I think if they ever do, and get everybody on board, you'll see a change in Israeli culture itself. Because they'll say, wow, we can't afford to leave this land. We can't go to America because it's easier to live, and so on and so forth. I think you would see that. As compared to now, when people can go and say, I'm not making it here, I can go anywhere. You know, I'll be Frank Sinatra. I can't make it here, I'll make it somewhere. Okay, so now not long after the 67 war.
So what is your opinion, because of all the Orthodox picketing in Jerusalem right
That was in the last class. The 60. I'll say it one more time for you in this class. We can have it twice on the day. Okay. The argument is very simple. You have to pick up your hat so I can keep your eyes. Listen when I speak. Okay. The argument is very simple. According to what do you call them? The right wing? What?
Ultra-Orthodox.
Ultra-Orthodox. According to the ultra-Orthodox.
You see all the pictures?
I didn't say anything. According to ultra-Orthodox, as it was brought over, it says that they are fighting the war from the yeshiva just as the army is fighting the war. So I'll say it one more time. Okay? According to the Torah, the tzaddikim are the ones. First of all, we have to study Torah. We have to fast. We have to do everything we're supposed to be doing. But the ones that would go into the war biblically were the tzaddikim, the righteous ones, not the people who are not righteous. It said that if anybody had sin on them and they were afraid of war, why were you afraid of war? Because you have sin, you're going to be killed. So therefore, go home. So for everybody out there, the answer would be that while they should be studying Torah and they should be religious, they should be the only ones protecting the land and not the others, actually. The others should be sent away. Because that's when people die. They die from sin. Okay, that's my shortened. If you want to see the longer thing, you have to go to my Joshua class. What do you want to know?
What is your opinion on it? Your opinion.
My opinion is. What do you mean by my opinion?
Well.
What do you want me to say? That I'm not in Israel.
I don't know.
The answer is Jim.
I'm totally lost about it.
In reality, I'm not in Israel. I don't know what the deals are. I'm not sure what's really going on there. But if you ask me from a religious point of view, that's all I can tell you. I really don't know. I'm not there. I'm not there.
From what the newspapers say, I never saw.
Newspapers lie, and they lie through their teeth, and we can see that with our own government. But we don't know what's going on in our own government. So I don't take the newspapers at all.
They basically said the same thing, that they're there to study the Torah, and they shouldn't be fighting.
Fine. So that's what they're hoping.
That's all they had. The Daily Mail in New York had so many pictures. I never saw. Did you see it?
Okay.
I'm sending the article. I never saw so many black hats in my life. 50,000. You read the pictures. There were 50,000 people picketed in New York City.
Okay.
Did you know that? 50,000 people.
No, they should have had 1 million. But it's it's not going to do anything. It's not going to do anything. They can picket all they want. No, if you have to move.
According to a spokesman from the Israeli government, they said that if they draft from the they call it the ultra-Orthodox.
Because they're ignorant, right?
Well, that's what they call it.
Okay, because they're ignorant.
Yeah, I'm just quoting it. They said that they would only draft a very small percentage. I'm just going to.
You know, and I'm going to tell you again. I know I'm going to be. Somebody's going to find me and hit me for these things. They're liars, just like our government lies through their teeth. They're lying through their teeth. And once they are allowed to draft one person, they will draft whomever they want to draft. Well, it's the biggest lie in history. It's like saying taxes won't go up. Read my lips. Okay? Or gas will be whatever's going to be, or we're not going to be. I'm going to close down Gitmo, or I'm going to get people out of. We're going to end the war. All these things.
I don't disagree with it. When I read the article, and I said, "What kind of nonsense is that? They're on these."
Sure, it's a joke.
They don't even give a number.
It's a joke. It's a total joke. It's a lie. It's once again a government lying to its people and lying to the press, trying to win a war of words. Again, if anybody, I don't know, for the 12 people listening to this, I think I'm safe. But for the, if anybody gets this in Israel, I'm sure they're going to come after me. Right? Yeah. Now it's in the cloud. But I was very good. I hit up Bush. I hit up Republicans. I hit up everybody. I hit up everybody because they're all a bunch of liars.
But the IDF today does have ultra-Orthodox.
There are. Again, let's call them religious. Let's call them Orthodox. They're not ultra-religious.
Well,
there's no such thing as ultra-Orthodox.
Well, that's what they call it.
There's no such thing, though. I tell you, it's pure ignorance. It's a way to spin something. The religious are in there. It's called the Hesder Yeshiva.
The what?
Hesder Yeshiva. They've been in the army for years. Since the inception, I believe, they've been in the army. So we've always had people fighting. It's the people that are in yeshiva, other yeshivas that they want. If a person, by the way, logically, if I don't want to fight, I'm not a good soldier. It's a bad situation to put a bad soldier into war.
Yeah,
Okay?
I
So
agree.
it's pure politics, which is why you really get me off the history. But it's
No, it's
pure
not.
politics, and really that's the problem. They're not doing it because they really want the Orthodox to fight. They're happy, just like the Arabs don't want to get rid of the Palestinian refugees because living on Gaza because it's good press. It's always something to hold up. So also the Israeli government is doing the same stupidity. They're playing the same game.
You think it's
all
valid
really
when they say, right now, again, I'm using the word ultra-Orthodox because they do, instead of religious, that it's about, I think, don't quote me on this 100%, they said it's about 5 or 6% of the population, or do you think?
Of what?
The Jewish Israeli population.
I'm not sure what they're defining as ultra-Orthodox at that point.
Well,
You have probably about 30 to 40% of Orthodox Jewry in Israel today.
oh, they didn't say that. They said,
Yeah, they're not considered that either.
they said it was low. They said by the year 25,
There'll be nothing.
it should be even about 10%, about 15%.
We're much higher than that. It's fine.
Hey, I'm just telling you what I read.
Yeah, okay, fine. Okay. Let's go on. Okay, so now in 67, the Vatican called for the internationalization of Jerusalem. Why they do that, by the way? Because there's a prophecy in the church that as long as the Jews do not accept Jesus as the Messiah, they will always be wandering Jews. They will never have a homeland. Well, 1948 sort of threw them into a tailspin. It just shows you don't make a prophecy if you can't back it up, okay? And then in 48, when they thought the Jews were going to be destroyed, they didn't say anything. And they didn't have to because Jerusalem wasn't in Jewish control, it was in Judean control. So they were safe for another 20 years. But when the Israelis got control of Jerusalem, well, that messed everything up because now we are home. We have our capital back. It's over. Their prophecy is totally disproven. So now what do? Let's have an international capital. And they still recognize, they will not, to this day, the United States has not recognized, nor will Israel, nor has the Vatican recognize Jerusalem as our state capital. They recognize, I think, Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv. To this very day. Okay? So, and there was just, I think one pope actually wanted to recognize it, and I think then he died, was killed, shot, I don't know what. Retired, I'm not sure what happened to him. But it's, I know somebody wanted to. There was a couple of quick
promised.
How many times do I have to say? Government lies through the teeth, okay? Doesn't matter.
Controversy about where our embassy is.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Right, they wanted to move it. Somebody wanted to move it, and they said no.
Yeah.
To this very day, we don't have an embassy in Jerusalem, as far as I know.
One of the things I was going to mention, from our last class, how we can connect things
Right.
as we learn. You imagine having enemies on three fronts,
Yes.
Uh-huh.
and you have to, just planning a preemptive attack against three fronts is and your narrowest border is only 9 miles. You could be cut in two. That's what there was secret agreement between Nasser and Jordan to cut the country in two and then have the Syrians come down.
Right.
That in 6 days, that's like in our last class. This stands as a monument, as a miracle that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it probably changed a lot of people's minds about religion.
It did.
In 1967, there was a mass, in Israel, there was a mass return to yeshiva, to religious life. It didn't last long, but there was a mass movement towards that because people had recognized there was something miraculous going on here. There was no way to explain it. It still is no way to explain it. So a lot of people did become religious. Again, it was a flash in the pan for many people, but it did create something, and we're still living off of that. There's no question about that. There's still something that we can say. There's a pride that goes into that we did 7 days that Hashem, 6 days that Hashem helped us out. It certainly is a reinforcement to the religious folk out there.
What is the capital of Israel according to the Israeli government?
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem, that's what I thought.
Right.
But according to everyone else, they say Tel Aviv.
Tel Aviv.
So
That's where the embassies are. I shouldn't say everybody else, but I know that the major countries are in Tel Aviv.
okay.
The Knesset meets in
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem.
Everybody, again, Jerusalem is our capital. It would be like like in America saying the Congress. Everybody's in Washington, but where's our capital? Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever you want. That's why everybody else sends us up to Indianapolis. Just shout out to Indy. Again, but because the Indianapolis 500, so we have to. That's our capital. Or where we have all the motorcycles is around here. What's it called? There's a whole motorcycle thing around here.
It goes from Sturgis.
Sturgis. I knew Sturgis, right.
It's even smaller.
There you go.
Much
That's our capital. That's what they're doing. They're saying, let's have a capital. Okay. That's what it'll be. Okay, so now the Soviet, I'm sorry. Now Israel's actions were worse than the Nazis because the Catholic Church, he says, this is a joke. Okay. It says, evidently, Israeli actions were worse than the Nazis because the Catholic Church that had remained silent during the Holocaust protested vehemently against the Jewish conquest of Jerusalem. Again, for their reason. They didn't want to, they have a prophecy saying we can't be there. The Soviet Union broke its diplomatic relations with Israel, perhaps because the Russians saw the Jews now had strong relations with the U.S., and they hoped to gain the Arab states as client states. So again, well, all the big countries are looking to gain a stronghold in this area of the world. Could have been for the oil, it could be just for the straight out power, whatever. Everybody, again, the last class, the Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it's talking about connections, okay? But it could be, everybody knows that that's the place to own. It's also the crossroads of that area, so, there's a lot going on. With all ties broken to Israel, many Soviet Jews, again, now we have Soviet Jews involved. They were no longer friendly with them, so the Jews now become imprisoned by the very system that they stayed in. They were, communism by its nature is anti-religious, so any Jew who expressed an interest in moving to Israel was immediately suspect of subversive behavior, and they become known as refuseniks. Okay, they don't get jobs anymore. They lose their visas. They lose everything. Okay? And some of the one of the guys, Sharansky, who was a famous refusenik. And these people I don't know. Vladimir Slepik, Sylvia Zalmanson, Joseph Mendelovich, and Eliyahu Esses. We had a speaker here in the Torah Center, Judge Butler, who spoke of somebody else, and he was along with the NCSY group that he was running the National Council of Synagogue Youth, the Orthodox youth groups. He was working with them to try to get out some woman who was a housewife and so on and so forth from Russia, and they had a whole campaign try to get this woman out. They were going to sell bracelets and so on and so forth. And to his chagrin, she got up before he could sell the bracelets. Okay, but if you watch, we don't have that on tape. Okay, it's one thing we don't have on tape in our library. But there was, to get Jews out of Soviet Russia was a very big thing. That's actually what catapulted Meir Kahan into the public arena. Do you know who I'm talking about when I say Meir Kahan? Meir Kahan was a Jewish Defense League. He was the founder of the Jewish Defense League. He started around 67. I'm pretty sure that's when it started, or maybe a little before. But his main thing was to get Jews out of Soviet Russia. That he would what do you call it? Protest at the embassy. He made a lot of noise, being arrested over and over and over. He said Jews will no longer lie down like lambs. He wanted to arm the Jews. He wanted them, just like he had Black Panthers in those days. He saw Black Panthers. So the JDL. But Black Panthers were coming out. JDL, he had little gangland wars there. But it's between these different groups. But it was Meir Kahan was an Orthodox rabbi who again wanted to go via Torah and say we have to do certain things. He also made up a whole story, and it was a letter to the world. It's called, if you Google it, Letter to the World by Maya Khan. And he says, he was talking after we had taken over the West Bank, what they call the West Bank, the occupied territories, and the government everybody kept saying, give it back, and that's why the Arabs are against us. So in his letter to the world, he said, the reason that the Nazis attacked us and killed us was because we didn't give the land back to the Arabs and that we won 67. And there's all the world's ills, all the stuff that we've gone through, it must be because we didn't give the land back in 67.
Who said that?
That was Maya Khan in the Letter to the World. You have to Google it. Google it. It's so beautiful what he writes, because he shows the stupidity of that claim, that all these problems, because we took over, we won that area and refused to hand it back to them. Because of that, so he goes through all the pogroms that we had to do was before that, and that's all because we didn't give the land back in 67, because we live in the West Bank. And so I read this to my congregation, and I had right-wingers, I had left-wingers in my synagogue, okay? I had Democrats and I had Republicans. And so I saw that, I got this letter, and I said, I'm going to read the letter, and I'm not going to tell you who wrote it till the very end. Because I knew if I would have said Mike Kahan, would have lost everybody, it would have lost my left-wingers. So I read this whole letter, and you see everybody's heads going, yeah, he's right, he's right, he's right, he's right. Everybody. And then I said, and I said, when it was written, I said, I forget when he wrote it, and I said, and it's written by Rabbi Meir Kahan, of blessed memory, because he was dead at that point.
He was shot by who?
Arab assassination, I think it was. Yeah. I think it was,
hotel in New York.
yeah. So, and what happened was, all the left-wingers were embarrassed that they kept shaking their head. They wanted to string me up that day. But what he wrote was true. They wanted to blame everything on 67 when we took over, but it had nothing I think he actually wrote it probably in 1980. But it had nothing to do with that. Okay? But that's what it is. Okay, so you have to deal with that. So now you have the back to Soviet Union. The virulent Soviet opposition to Israel resulted in a reaction in which many Russian Jews started learning Hebrew and secretly started studying their heritage. This, again, that was refuseniks. And you had Lubavitch got into this because they would go into Russia and they would smuggle in food with them, and they would smuggle in these books. They were secretly endangering their lives, by the way. If anybody was caught doing this, they would be killed. Okay, so Lubavitch is out there. They put their lives on the line to serve God and to help others serve God. This is a very big thing. They also had to learn Russian, which is why a lot of Lubavitchers to this very day know Russian. Okay. Those who gained a bit of mastery, so they began teaching other people, all this in secret, and because, like I said, it was considered a crime. So, and finally, in the 80s, the 70s and 80s, like I said, we started the American Jews, mostly led by Meir Kahan, you have to give the guy credit, exerted political pressure, staging demonstrations, protests, mass rallies, all this. They were trying to get people aware of what was going on in Soviet Russia, get the Jews out of Russia. Okay. In 72, you had Munich, Germany. They had the Olympic Games. Now, this I actually remember. Okay, September 5th, 8. Actually, I saw a movie on this recently. Yeah. Okay, that's what I remember so well. On September 5th, you had 8 Palestinian terrorists slipped into the Olympic village where they shot and killed 2 Israelis. One an athlete and the other a coach. Terrorists took 9 others and demanded the release of 200 Arab prisoners when the Germans attempted to stop the terrorists from leaving Germany with the hostages. One of the helicopters in which the Israelis were being held was blown up by a grenade. The remaining hostages were shot. In total, 11 Israeli athletes were murdered. And what we always have to remember is these were athletes in World Games, not soldiers, not on the army field, not anywhere near the battle zone. And that's what happened. Okay? So, 5 terrorists were killed at the scene, and the remaining 3 were arrested. 3 were released a month later. However, when their freedom was demanded in return for the safety of a hijacked Lufthansa jet. So, the Palestinians have always been fully in the shtick, where they kill, when they're captured, they go into jail, they sit there for a couple of weeks, whatever, until they do something else, and then demand release. To get a Gilad Shalit out of prisoners, that was 2000. He was, I remember I was in Maine at that point. I think he was captured in 2000. He was, and again, he was off duty. They captured it. He was, I think, hitchhiking home. And they got him with his 3 friends or something. And so they held him hostage for years. And to release him, I think they had to release 200, 300 prisoners who were known killers. Known killers. And of course the Israeli government gave in to that. Yeah. But that's what it is. Okay. And that became known as the Munich Massacre. So in 73, the Arabs once again attempted to remove Israel from the map. While there had been some warnings that an attack was imminent, the Arabs stealthily waited for Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, when they knew that almost all of Israel's citizens would be in synagogue and fasting, faced with mortal danger. The Israeli defense force mobilized as quickly as possible and bravely fought off the enemy that attacked on all fronts. All fronts were open. Syrians in the north towards the Golan Heights, even entering an Israeli village in the Galilee. In the south, the so-called impenetrable Bar-Lev line, which was Israel's security line, was manned by limited numbers of out-of-ship reservists and very poorly maintained. The Egyptians' cuts were like a hot knife through butter. Very nice way to say this, okay? And then, before Nixon ordered an emergency U.S. airlift of ammunition and weapons during the 73 war, Israel only had 2 days' worth of ammunition left. And Israel people really believed that the end of Israel was at hand. And by the way, not only in Israel, but I think most Jews around the world thought this was over. I know that in Stoughton, Massachusetts, everybody figured it's gone. That's where I lived. And people were really praying. Remember, it's Yom Kippur. We're talking Yom Kippur, our holiest day, besides Shabbos. Okay? And nobody thought twice about it. The Babasha Rebbe actually came out and said to the soldiers, you can eat. You have to eat. You must eat today, so you'll have energy to fight. He actually gave a ruling like that. At least that's what they said in his name. I didn't hear him say it myself, but they said in his name that they have to eat. I heard it from his representatives, so I have to assume it's true. So, but that's really strange, because normally we would say you can't eat on Yom Kippur, so it's a fast day. Okay? But it's they did a lot of damage. There was a lot of trepidation about that war, and there were a lot of people lost in that war. Golda Meir took it really hard, because there was apparently some advance warning, but she didn't want to do a preemptive strike, whatever the case is going to be. But it was also, after 67, they also felt impenetrable. And, you can't feel impenetrable. If you're going to fight a traditional war, you have people who are willing to die to get you out of there. I mean, it's just not a good thing. And calling for your death every single day, it's just not a time to relax. But, that's what we can do. So eventually Israel won, but only after 3,000 Israeli soldiers lost their lives. Israel pushed back the Arab armies, and there was a ceasefire. After 73, again, there was an increase in the Israeli Bolshevik movement. There was people returning from secularism to come to orthodoxy. One of the reasons motivating this return was, after victory of 67, people saw themselves as infallible and invincible. After 73, they saw they're not, and it was only through God's miracles that this happened. I don't know why they couldn't figure it out in 67. That was a miracle, but okay. But as a result, people started again in 73. By the way, after any tragedy, the first thing people do is turn to God. So it's not that strange, really. Okay, after any when it's a good thing, people don't turn to God. But when it's a tragedy, if I get out of a horrible accident and I walk away, I say, there must be God. I must have a purpose in life. I don't know why that proves anything. You could just say you were lucky. Okay, if I want to be a real atheist about it, you were just lucky. But it's because that's all around the world. But in these people, they came to a realization that something up there must want me alive, so let me get in contact. And whatever works. I mean, why should I belittle that? But it also happens when somebody dies. You say there must be something else out there. Okay, so any tragedy is potentially will bring people back. Which again, I'm going way off subject when I say this. Which is why when the rabbis came up with saying Kaddish for the bereaved, we say Kaddish for his parents for a year or somebody else for 30 days, and having to go to shul 3 times a day, be part of that again. And for a long time, people would do that until we came to America, and that was the assimilation we have today. A lot of people, even if they were not religious, would go to the synagogue for that year for the parents, or for the 30 days for their other people who died. That brought a lot of people in contact with Judaism who never would have been in contact. And they understood that in tragedy, I can get you. So it was a good move on their part.
When did that start? You know?
Kaddish was already back in the Talmudic times, but the Yortzeit, that concept of coming back, that was it's a German word, so that started, I think, in probably around 900. It's a relatively recent innovation, and it's recent in the historical world. It's recent. But it's one of these smarter innovations. Like I said, it brought people back, and they knew at that moment I can get you. I can try to help you out here. Is today though people are so far removed that they don't get it. That does not work. It absolutely does not work anymore. People do not say Kaddish for the most part, unless you're in the Orthodox world, and very few conservative will still say it. I guess I shouldn't say very few, but I don't know how many conservatives will say. I continue to go every single day. I'm talking once in a while. I mean, when they're in church, they'll say it, but otherwise to go every day, I don't know how many people want to do that anymore.
And you said every day, 3 times a day?
3 times a day.
Not just one.
Did you say for 30 days or for a year?
For your parents, it was a year. For everybody else, it's 30 days. But I want you to know something. For most people didn't realize that, and they would come for the full year regardless.
Yeah.
Because I remember somebody saying Kaddish for his wife. And he was coming. He never came before.
Wow.
And I was a young kid. I was young, I was brash, and I was tired. Those are my 3 excuses. What I'm about to tell you. He came in, and I said, and he was complaining, why isn't there a minyan?
Oh.
And I said to him, excuse me, because I was coming every day. My father drove me every day. So I was coming every day, and I said to him, excuse me, where were you before your wife died? Well, you weren't here. Why weren't you here? And you know what's worse? When you're finished, you'll never show up again. My father wanted to smack me, and probably did. I have a short memory for that. He wanted to kill me. And I said to him, but Dad, I'm right. He said, even if you're right, you can't say it. He said, you are right. He won't come back, but you can't say that. He was so embarrassed I would say that, but I was so tired. I was hungry, tired, and I was a little kid. And I remember the vehemence I said it was. I was so disgusted. Wow. How dare you say where's the meeting when you never show up? But by the way, postscript, he never showed up after that.
And then
that was after his Kaddish.
What is the effect of the Kaddish? And what does the prayer what's the spiritual?
So it's supposed to kick the. When you say Kaddish, what happens is you're getting the congregation to praise God in public. So that takes the soul to the next level. So again, the only way I can earn merits, and when I'm up there, is through my kids. Okay. When they do mitzvot, so that's going to kick me up a little more because I can't do it anymore. So the same thing when somebody dies, if I'm saying Kaddish if it's my parents, so no one can earn merits. The spiritual concept is I'm getting people together to praise God in public. It kicks them up a little more. Just a little more.
On the behalf of the departed.
My mitzvah, whatever I do, by the way, whatever mitzvah I do, gets them up. So they constantly get reward off of my mitzvah, off of my teaching, everything else. They need a good investment in it. Hopefully. I can tell you. I'm hoping it made a good investment on me, and I'm hoping I make a good investment on my kids. It's what we call the Roth IRA. I get the interest later. Okay? But really, that's what the concept is. But people didn't realize that. They thought Kaddish, by the way, was a prayer about death. It has nothing to do with death. It's all about sanctifying God. If they just read the English, which is right next to them, they would have realized that. But for some reason, they didn't do that. They only read the Aramaic, not even Hebrew. And the reason it was written in Aramaic was because Aramaic was the spoken language at that time, just like English is today. Okay, so it was written in the vernacular so they would understand what they were saying. But today, like I said, people don't understand Aramaic. So, and they don't look to the English because I wouldn't look at the English. I'll just say the Hebrew, that's holy. Fine, do what you want. But they really never understood that they were, if you ask most of them, they would say, and certainly when I was growing up, pray for the dead. And you look at it and say, it has nothing to do with the dead, it's just praising God. Well, why am I saying this? They would themselves have to start questioning that. But like I said, most of them didn't get that far. They just said it was the worst. And what they did was they got to hear the rabbi speak. So if the rabbi would have spoken on Torah instead of politics, which is, again, the modern thing that people are doing, and that stretched across all borders, then they could have potentially had an impact on the soul of the person. But because they spoke politics then, and all the other foolishness that goes on in pulpit life, so I don't think it had the effect that the original founders of this institution would have wanted.
Okay.
That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay? Let's just stop there.
You know, the